Action.
Hi there, this is Anatole.
And this is Josh.
So we want to talk a little bit about what is spirituality and how is it different from coaching, from meditation, from religion. But I guess we should focus on spirituality first and then see. So what is spirituality?
Spirituality is drinking tea out of mason jars, or whatever you're drinking.
It is tea, yeah. It's
What
my favorite Earl Grey with some milk.
Okay.
I'm down on chai.
No more chai?
I have one more packet,
Okay.
and that's it.
You're low on chai.
No, I'm down on chai. That's why I have only. That's why I'm low on chai.
Okay. So
I'm moving away from India and Eastern spirituality towards Latin America. How Earl Grey comes in it, that is the mystery to be solved.
well, gray is in the middle. So, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
It's still black tea, but because it's Earl Grey.
Mm-hmm. It's made, by the way, it's made in Sri Lanka, so
yeah.
So it's still.
You haven't made it very far.
No. No.
But at least you're on an island. Yeah. So.
Exactly. I'm trying to escape desperately.
That's right.
Yeah. So, what is spirituality?
Well, first and foremost, as we were talking about in one of the previous videos, it starts with an intention. There's this thing inside all of us that when it gets turned on, it creates this focus, this intention that generally in the beginning it's very hard to describe, and even throughout it's something that's not easily describable in words. But it's
well, I'll throw my 2 cents right away. As some of you know, my second book, Abandoning Exile, and I'll try my best to stick links at the bottom of the video for this. I tried to figure this out, and what I realized is that most important thing is that we're all on the spiritual path, all of us. But when I start calling it spirituality, is when there is a clear differentiation between your emotional needs, your intellectual needs, your family needs, your bodily needs, and what I call addressing spiritual pain. So spirituality, for me, starts when you realize that your personality, your name, your profession, your life, the whole being that you call, John, Mary, Josh, Anatole, becomes a burden. You don't want to be an individual anymore. You want to become something much bigger. And that's what I call, more or less, what I call spiritual pain. It's a pain of being caught by personality, imprisoned by your mind, imprisoned by your emotions. So it's basically a movement away from being human towards being quote unquote divine. In other words, we're moving away from being an individual human and animal, as someone called the humans naked apes, towards something far more deep than that. That's one thing, very important. another thing is that I've never seen anyone who becomes conscious of their spiritual longing, their spiritual desire, who also does not have emotional needs, physical needs, intellectual needs. And these needs people address through coaching, through psychotherapy, through reading books, through basically enjoying life the way most people enjoy life, which is perfectly fine, but let's not call it spirituality. So when you go to a coach to help you with your life hacking, as they call it, life hacks, that's not what spirituality is. Spirituality specifically means that you have partially or fully awakened understanding of your spiritual pain, and you want to deal with it for real. Not talk about it, but actually address it. So that's my 2 cents for the moment.
Well, another thing to say is, again, within all of those needs, because you kind of see the typical hierarchy of what the makings of a human. So you have the physical, you have the emotional, you have mental, and then you commonly see the spiritual. And although some of those things, it's they go into each other, but each one basically has its own domain. They feed into one another, kind of like a circle vector. But with spirituality, it's something that if you do not have that practice, that focus, it will create a lot of spiritual pain, and most people don't know that that's what's happening there. And then it can be commonly misconstrued, especially in our current context, because within our Western culture, modern Western culture, spirituality is not well defined. And it's been much better defined throughout cultures of the past. You have just looking at Indian culture, there's plenty of good and bad in any culture, but a lot of those still had spirituality as to a certain extent, well-defined aspect of human existence, which has been more or less lost in current context, and it tries to be occupied by different religions and different new age things. Mm-hmm. But just to look at it very simply, of exactly how you defined it, there is this spiritual aspect of us, and it is the yearning, which we can do while living, the yearning to a certain extent let go of the ego self and all of these things that are entrapping us, to let go fully into what you can call divine love, universe, whatever word you wish to call it, but being able to surrender to that and become it.
Well, I love that you mentioned pathways or hierarchies. I'm writing my 3rd book right now, as Josh, you already know, and the viewers now do. And God only knows when that's going to happen. And I started thinking about different hierarchies. The reason why I started thinking about hierarchies is that I wanted to somehow understand the different career paths. So for example, you have a mother or father, so they derive meaning from having a family, growing, helping their children grow. There is a traditional career path where you get a job and then you ascend the career hierarchy when you become, an assistant manager, then vice president, then president, then CEO, etc. It's also a certain kind of growth. and we should not diminish that. It's important in some contexts. Same thing with psychology and emotional and emotions. We can get deeper into our emotions, in our emotional awareness, into our humanness. But then there is also a spiritual hierarchy. And as you, Josh, just mentioned several times, is that it's really poorly defined in the Western world. And it's actually not that well defined in India and um, in other Asian situations. And well, for that matter, it's not well defined in Latin America. It's really a hierarchy of deeper and deeper connection with God, deeper and deeper tuning into, well, let's call it universal love. And there are different stages on that hierarchical path. And that hierarchy, that spiritual hierarchy, just like all other hierarchies that I'm talking about, they deliver a certain kind of meaning. They give you a certain kind, give you your life meaning, and give your life a certain kind of significance. And where I'm getting with all this is that this significance, this meaning, will be meaningful to you only if you naturally belong to that hierarchy. So if you naturally need to become a family man or a woman and have children, if you naturally need to have a professional career where you ascend to president, vice president, etc., then that ascension will be meaningful to you. But if you naturally belong to spiritual hierarchy, only moving up that hierarchy will provide meaning to you in life. And yes, most people uh, belong to several hierarchies at the same time. And one of the big tasks of the spiritual path is figuring out which hierarchy is more important to you. So, for example, I have a friend, a student. Well, let's not get into this kind of terms. And this person really, really would like to have a relationship, wants to get married, and at the same time, very much interested in spirituality. And for this person, there will be a choice um, between these two hierarchies because he's trying to ascend both of them. And maybe they will converge into one hierarchy. Maybe one will win over another. So for some people, they may think that they're interested in spiritual ascension, but in fact, they really would like to understand their emotions. And some people may think that they're trying to understand their emotions, but actually they want to ascend. They want to understand the spiritual hierarchy and how they belong to it. And these distinctions are very important. I'm trying to understand myself why they're so important. Well, I kind of can feel why they're important. The thing about spiritual hierarchy, the spiritual ascension, or diving into deeper and deeper love and wisdom, is that other hierarchies, generally you can talk about them. Spiritual hierarchy, because it leads you towards leads you beyond words, beyond the intellect, beyond the rational, it's very hard to talk about it. You can only feel it. And that's why it's very common, like people on the spiritual hierarchy, you try to tell to your friends that you found something really meaningful, and what they hear is that you're getting in some kind of weird cult or getting into something really weird. All they're trying to tell you is that they don't really understand that what is meaningful to you is not really meaningful to them. But you should not dismiss your membership, so to speak, in this spiritual ascension hierarchy, so to speak, because it's very important to you. And going back to the last thing you said, one of the things you said, is that in our Western world, spiritual hierarchy is very poorly understood. Is not very well understood. And what happens is that people looking for belonging to understanding, they get into all kind of new age movements. They get into Well, they go to a psychologist trying to address something which psychologists cannot possibly address well. And if we talk about places like India, where these hierarchies are well understood, because they're well understood, they're generally really feared. There's a huge amount of fear, in those societies that, God forbid, you will quit your human attachments and decide to belong to some weird sect in the Himalayas and smoke dope or something. Because in India, in particular, there is quite a bit of understanding of these things because of the cultural stories that are there all the time. But if you dig deeper, you'll find that there's not very much of the deep understanding of these things. So it's basically the same thing, human hierarchies, psychological, emotional, intellectual, career hierarchies. People who belong to those cannot understand, wherever you are, cannot understand spiritual hierarchy very well, unless these people naturally belong to it. And poets, they say, approach that hierarchy, but they are scared to enter it. That's why they talk about it.
Well, it's to surrender, spirituality, in essence, is the deepest level of surrender that you can allow yourself to go through, which is a very scary thing. I mean, to a certain extent, the ego dies, but it's still there. And that, for any human being, is scary beyond words. But it's also beautiful.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I would be cautious to say that this is scary, mainly because if you need it, if you want it, you're not going to give a shit whether it is scary or not.
Right.
So
But it's a common.
Yeah,
it's
a common excuse. Yeah.
Right.
Very common. And this is actually a defining excuse. It's like, when someone starts talking negatively about gurus, for example, it's kind of like, talking negatively about your doctor. The simple reality is that if you need medical assistance, you need medical assistance. That's it. Then it becomes an issue who you're going to go to get your whatever, your your disease cured.
Right.
So this is one of the reasons why I started talking about spiritual pain, is that if you actually have it, it will be highly irrelevant to you who talks about what bullshit, because what will be relevant to you is how to get rid of that pain. And spiritual pain is worst pain that there could be, because it's at a very deep level and it's very, very upsetting. If you have it and then you go to psychiatrists and psychologists, they're going to try to pin on you that you're suicidal, and you will be. It's just going to be a huge mess. And then amazing thing will happen. You just go to a competent spiritual teacher and they fix it to you by basically explain to you what's going on with you.
Yeah. Well, it's you have to go to the right doctor. If you're going to a brain surgeon to try and fix a knee issue, he's probably going to give you poor advice.
They will cut off the wrong part of your body. Yeah.
They'll say, well, your knee's an issue. You need some brain surgery to fix that knee issue. It's not good.
Well, you will become a brainless, lame man.
Right. Well, let's just cut out the brain receptor, or the pain receptor in your brain, and then you won't feel any more pain. But you'll also essentially have a lobotomy. So, oh my goodness. But no, but an important verbiage that you're using, because it's the diving deep.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna say, get on the right train and dive deep.
Correct.
And if you get on the wrong train, get off it, go on to the right train.
Yeah.
And if you get on the wrong train, don't complain later on that you got to the wrong place.
Yeah.
Should we call it quits on this?
Sure.
What do you think? All right, let's do that.